Yeah, I see Kyle. Kyle, if you request to speak, if you haven't done so already, you should be able to get that upgrade, but let's kick off. So, hey everyone, and welcome to the first X Spaces in our Road to Integration series with Render Network and Salad Technologies. I'm hoping this is the first of many anyway. We'll see how it goes. We haven't done a Spaces in a while, as Sunny said, so good to be back. So what is the Road to Integration? It refers to the recently passed RNP 23 governance proposal that brings Render Network to Salad as their on-chain payments layer. Real quickly, I'm Sylvia Lacayo, Head of Marketing and Communications at Render Network Foundation. We've got the Salad team here, the Render Network team too. We will be talking about the collaboration between the two entities, the integration roadmap at a high level, and why we're excited about what we're building together. If you have been following along, you've probably seen some integration announcements already. Today, we're going to go a little deeper into the details, but we're also going to zoom out and talk about the broader compute landscape. So everything from AI demand, GPU shortages, why distributed compute networks are having a bit of a moment now, and more. So feel free to drop your questions in the comments. Sunny and I will be checking those periodically. Sunny, do you want to say hi for anyone who just joined?
Hey everybody, how is it going? I am Sunny from the Render Network Foundation. Some of you may be familiar with my voice with other spaces that we have held. I look after our grants program here at the foundation. So if you're a 3D artist or somebody looking for GPU compute power, definitely get in touch. And anybody listening to this on the replay, you are also more than welcome to leave some comments or questions or DM the Render Network account or myself, and we will absolutely get back to you as well.
All right. So with that, let's get everybody else introduced, and then we'll jump right in. Let's start with Bob Miles on the Salad team and work our way around from there. Bob?
Thanks, Sylvia. Yep, this is Bob here. I'm the founder and CEO of Salad, and this is actually my first X Space, so I'm very excited to be here and cover all of those topics you went through there, Sylvia.
Excellent. Kyle, are you able to do a quick intro?
Yes, hello. I'm Kyle Dodson. I'm the CTO at Salad, and also first time here on an X Space, but very excited to keep this conversation going. I know I got to meet several people when we were discussing RNP 23, and excited to give some updates.
Excellent. Yeah, it was really good to meet you in person. It's the benefit of in real life events like RenderCon. All right, let's move on to Tristan. Do you want to do a quick intro?
Hi, thanks, Sylvia. I'm Tristan. I'm head of operations at the Render Network Foundation.
And Trevor.
Ooh, I think we need to upgrade Trevor to a speaker. We will do that in the background.
Yep, we can do that. Trevor Harris Jones is a board member of Render Network Foundation. We can let him do a bit of a deeper dive when we get him on. But why don't we get started with the first question? Let's just dive right in. This is for you, Bob. So RNP 23 is all about, like I said, bringing Render Network through the Render token as an on-chain payments layer for Salad. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background and then tell us why it's important to move, or important to Salad to move towards an on-chain payments system and reward system instead of launching a standalone token?
Yeah, so we've been operating a distributed cloud for 8 years now, and one of the main points of friction that we've really come to feel in our business operations is payment processes, legacy payment processes, centralized Web 2 payment processes that exist today. That's the tooling that runs our infrastructure, runs all of the transactions under the hood. And if you look at the profile of our infrastructure, we have thousands of nodes, tens of thousands of nodes that are distributed across 180 different countries across the globe. And equally on the other side of our marketplace, we have hundreds or thousands of customers that also come from all corners of the globe. And it was about this time last year that we hit a scale where we really started to recognize the friction and the pain that comes with running across a global footprint, as I just described. And just to anchor this in an example for you guys, we use Stripe today to collect a lot of payments for our customers, and obviously the internet is a place full of fraudsters trying to defraud you and get free services where they can, and using Stripe, there is tooling available. It's a system called Radar to really help protect against that. But what we found is that tooling is inadequate. It's a very blunt instrument. It leads to a lot of false positives. That's a lot of lost revenue for us and for our suppliers. And it was mid last year we hit the scale where we really started to recognize that this is an issue for the business, an issue for us as we continue to scale. And that's when Kyle and I really started going down the rabbit hole, looking into crypto payments as a solution to this problem. And we dove in pretty deep. We came to learn on that journey that there's a lot more potential than simply payments. But it was certainly the first problem that kind of brought us to crypto payments. And in the RMP, I might be jumping ahead here, but there's 3 milestones. The first 2 relate to render payouts for our providers. We call them chefs. These are typically PC gamers, and also render payments for our customers. We haven't announced it yet, but quietly shipped crypto and render payments a few weeks ago, and already we've come to learn that a lot of those points of friction that I just described are solved through on-chain crypto payments, and we've seen already a handful of people pay for our compute services in Render. So we're really excited about where this goes. Really excited to give you an update on our progress, and we're really starting to see the benefits of accepting these payments alongside the legacy rails that we have today.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. They've already shipped a payments option, which is always great to get this kind of insight. And I don't want to say alpha because it's such a loaded word, but basically, yes, you've now heard some of the progress the team here is making. Bob, before I move on to the rest of the team, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about what drove that sort of inflection point in the last year that you mentioned? And I guess we can all say AI compute jobs, but that feels a little broad. Maybe give us a little bit of color about what was driving that for you guys.
Yeah, I'll shorten the time frame there and really say the last month, Sylvia. It's obviously been growing over the past year and years now as AI proliferates. We've all seen it in the public stock market with AI stocks and earnings reports and just the massive build out that is going into supply to support AI and the amount of tokens that there is demand for. The inflection point that we really noticed was earlier this year with kind of or I suppose technically late last year, the release of OpenClaw, which kind of, that harness opened up or ushered in this new era of agentic AI, which is a very different profile in terms of how tokens are consumed and, more importantly, how many tokens are consumed. It's an order of magnitude more than a human who is limited by the input and output of either typing or speaking to a chatbot. An agent can actually spawn out so many more requests and consume so many more tokens for accomplishing either the same task or a much greater task. And so that really kicked off late last year. The AI budget blowouts, particularly of larger organizations, we've all seen that in the headlines the past couple of months, and that's these large organizations. Uber is an example, ServiceNow is an example, where they went through their annual AI budget in a matter of months. That has forced a lot of these enterprise businesses to reconsider that spend and start to think through what is a more efficient way of embracing AI without breaking the budget. And so it's really been the last month or 2 months where we have seen demand absolutely skyrocket for our profile of compute, which is smaller GPUs. That's the nature of our infrastructure. We're constrained by VRAM on those consumer GPUs. That limits the model size which can run. We don't support these SOTA, state-of-the-art models, which have billions or trillions of, tens of billions or hundreds or trillions of parameters. It's really only the last couple of months where people have started to kind of have that sticker shock from the cost of running AI, particularly on SOTA models, and they've started to look for alternatives. How can you route certain workloads, certain tasks, particularly agentic tasks, to smaller, perhaps purpose-built models that are equally capable of accomplishing the same task or delivering the same output. And so that trend really accelerated the last couple of months. The last month for us, we've been in a condition which we've never been in before, where demand has outstripped the amount of supply that we have on our network. So we've been growing quite aggressively the last couple of months. And Sylvia, at the top of the spaces here, you mentioned, there's kind of a moment happening now for distributed networks and decentralized networks. And really that comes down to the nature of the supply that we tap into is a lot of idle GPUs that were bought for another purpose. In our case, in Salad's case, it's primarily gamers who buy their GPU to play games, surf the web, watch YouTube, whatever it might be. But they can only do that so many hours per day. The other 20 hours in the day, they've got a very valuable asset that we can reward them for soon in Render. And so those dynamics on the demand side, where people are starting to seek tokens from smaller models for agentic workloads, capacity constraints in data centers, is really kind of culminating in this moment where for the last month, we've just seen accelerating demand. And this profile of demand is really something that can only be met by what is an enormous pool of compute resources, and that is internet-connected devices that are idle. And it's not a centralized player that can go in and unlock that supply. It really takes that distributed model to actually go and bring that supply online so that it can meet the growing demand. So it's definitely an exciting time. It's a trend we expect to continue. And we're really excited to see what plays out over the coming months and years.
Yeah, and I want to dive into some of these inefficiencies that you pointed to. But before we get to that, I want to see if Trevor can say a quick hello. Are you with us from a speaker standpoint?
Yes, I am. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, everybody. Apologies, I got caught by the spaces glitch there, but looks like I'm back up and running. I'm a huge fan of the Salad team and actually love this topic, so really excited to be jumping in here today.
Yeah, I want to get to you, but first, let's hear from Tristan. Can you share with us, Tristan, the perspective from the render side of the equation? Why is Salad strategically important to the render network ecosystem at this time, and what drove us to start these conversations with that team?
Absolutely, I'd love to. Can you hear me okay now? I had some messages that my audio was a bit low.
Yep, you're good.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks. And Bob, that was a fantastic overview. Really appreciate that. So yeah, from a render perspective, Bob and his team reached out to us. I would say as an effort to solve the problems around payments that Bob was talking about. And from a render perspective, it works well strategically for a few reasons. And I think for me, certainly, it's helpful to think in the context that render, when one really drills down, at its essence, it's an infrastructure layer for a decentralized economy. There are other networks, there are other subnets that use the render infrastructure, and that's what is really kind of at play here for Salad. And where Salad works well for render in this larger context is that they're also a decentralized GPU network. They have established demand and revenue and proven paying customers and usage from Salad's marketplace. So once the integration into the render ecosystem is complete, that will drive immediate on-chain activity. And once fully integrated, that will include render burns and increase token utility, particularly around the payments and rewards side. There's some other aspects that we also like about Salad. They're a product-led team, and they're operating as a front runner in the emerging GPU space and exploring those new use cases as they become relevant, including and forgive me for speaking a little bit on their behalf, but testing out agentic use cases, running them on their own GPUs, really dog fooding their own ideas and getting really under the hood of GPU usage. So that, alongside an active revenue growth plan with a strong customer pipeline, are all good signals to us. And then something that also you touched on already, but Salad doesn't have its own native token, and so there's no competing backend infrastructure that softens the overlap. So we think there is a really meaningful synergy here that works well for both Salad and Render.
Yep, totally agree. And I actually want to get Kyle in here to give us a perspective from the product side. But right before that, Kyle, so start warming up your mic. Trevor, you also were part of this journey, having those early conversations with Bob, Kyle, and the rest of the team. Anything to add here that Tristan hasn't touched on?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, a couple of things. To me, the deal was very much about scale. Bringing exponentially more nodes to the network overall and more revenue was definitely enticing. I really view this deal as almost the compute clients version 2. We went through trying a different format with some other partners. And what stands out here to me is agree with Tristan on the no competing token. But above and beyond that, I think the community did a great job structuring this around on-chain revenue as a KPI. And I think that is a great innovation and a good position to put us as we look out towards potentially other subnets and partners.
Yeah, 100%. All right, I actually want to dive into on-chain payments a bit more, but would love for Kyle, if you have the opportunity to walk us through from a product perspective or from your perspective, technology perspective, what is this promising to unlock for you guys? And then, it's totally fine to be honest too about what challenges you're foreseeing as you essentially onboard on-chain payments, on-chain rails to what is otherwise a fairly, robust technology, but to oriented operation that Salad is operating.
Yeah, the promise of what it brings, really, just again going back to, what was this opportunity? Where did conversation start? It really was looking through, months ago, where this space was going, and I think today it's pretty clear. Everybody can see it, right? This explosion of these agentic workloads and things, and the legacy payment systems just don't work. They really don't scale, and they don't really make sense from a technical product customer perspective. They push people into a lot of business models and workflows that are cumbersome, have various edge cases, problems that lead to other things downstream. And so, really, I think that this promise, right, and what we're talking about, and what Render has and built, the existing infrastructure, is it's accelerated for us, right? That exists. This community exists. It's something that now we can, build atop, integrate with, and that ecosystem is already there. So bringing that in now allows us to facilitate these use cases that really just haven't made sense and aren't working as they've been scaling. The challenges are, also living within that. The speed, the growth, what's going on. But these are more technical challenges. This is just figuring out now interoperability. And again, to also be clear, right, we have a lot of customers coming from, they're not Web3 natives. This is Web 2. And Salad really is kind of now bringing this bridge, where these Web 2 kind of customers can come in, continue to use this distributed infrastructure layer now atop, as we integrate and build this out on top of the Render Networks infrastructure, atop this decentralized system, to drive all of that. It becomes this nice bridge to bring that in, and really highlights, where that legacy system doesn't work. For us, the challenge is kind of just getting all those dots aligned, and with the rapid pace at which tools, agents, infrastructure, and other components that people are building, it's going to be really just making sure that these plug directly in, that they're very seamless, and ideally brings, what some people may say in a lot of SaaS environments. Some people look at it and say, "Oh, this feels very easy," but again, there's all these hidden edge cases. Here now, it's about, I think Render is going to unlock the way around a lot of those edge cases, and we can still help bring those, the easy guided workflows to that. But yeah, going to be a lot of technical challenges, and just connecting those, making it a very seamless experience, and making sure it's very clear for everyone. But I also love, I like what Trevor said. This is bringing on-chain, right? What is happening, and I think also going to be very powerful here. Another big pitch of that promise is just about the data that we're all going to have, right? So having the APIs, the on-chain data, and really being able to see and drive this forward, which I think will help serve. I anticipate it'll help Salad, but also more broadly speaking, the Render Network, just as far as demonstrating that these distributed, decentralized systems are scalable, they work, and they are taking up actual enterprise jobs already. And so I think as that message continues to be distributed, we'll see even more uptake in it.
So the other day I was trying to explain how I, send and receive payments on chain to some folks who had never tried it themselves. And for them, it wasn't necessarily clicking, because those folks, first of all, they live in the US and, are able to rely on, easily can send payments via Venmo to them if, we're sharing a meal or an activity. So there are sort of apps or layers on top of the existing rails, but underneath it, there's a lot of inefficiencies. And I would love, Kyle, if you could paint a picture for the audience as to what some of those inefficiencies are. So you talked about it, you touched on it, but could you maybe walk us through an example of how it starts to get a little hairy when when these systems have to interoperate or have a hard time doing so to achieve what you're trying to achieve on your network.
From the legacy payment
Yeah.
rails kind of perspective. Yeah. Okay. Yes. And so really it's a lot of the things that you can already, I'm sure, infer just as far as what a lot of the Web3 solutions deliver, right, on those same problems. But you have things related to timing. A lot of legacy payment solutions take a lot of time, and I mean sometimes we're talking weeks, right? That sometimes it can take settlement for various transactions and things. And so when you have a customer who's saying, "Hey, I really want to use this. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to scale up," and it gets into then the weeds of business processes is of great, we need payment in good faith in order to do this, because right, all of these providers, and that is again Salad, right, distributed machines running all over, those providers get paid for operating that. This isn't done on a for free credit, we'll trust you kind of system. So we see that unfortunately too frequently, where people can get stuck waiting on the speed of traditional institutions just being able to send and reconcile transactions, which with something like Render Networks infrastructure that obviously doesn't exist. It happens so fast that we can get to a state of being productive quickly, and instead of spending so much time and energy on just transferring that money, that value, that isn't the big problem that any of us want to focus on, right? We want to focus on actually running high scale applications and make it work. So that's a big one. I think that it's exciting, as I've been diving in, testing, doing transactions, looking at Render Network on Solana. So looking at the speed of Solana, to also the fees for running these transactions. Fees in other environments, again, traditional payment rails, they scale quickly, and that ends up getting hit. Why? That's not something that we just eat. Everybody knows that when you pay by a credit card or something else, those vendors are just marking up their products, their services, to account for these additional fees that the intermediaries are taking. So being able to bring those fees down, I think, is also hugely impactful. And again, that's really where we do start to bump into those challenges with a lot of these agentic use cases. And it pushes, a lot of companies, SaaS companies and others, into models where people need to do very large purchases, of bulk credits of things. And that represents other friction for customers, where they now need to budget around these other problems that exist with the legacy rails, and now more of their near-term capital and budgets are needing to be devoted and locked up in value elsewhere, just to work around that. So I think that just in general, the reliability, the speed, the fees, and the promise all around really does, these Web3 networks, Render and Solana, they address some of those biggest issues that just are not the technical issues of actually running your applications and doing the cool things that all these people are doing. They distract you with other business issues and things that are just not really something that I think in this day and age, as a society, global society, those aren't problems we should have. And they are solved. And so I think, again, us being able to partner with Render, do this integration and become a subnet, and kind of build that bridge out to this Web2 space where those customers are. Those are, I think, some of the biggest challenges and things that are just going to be immediately resolved. But also, to be clear, it's not just on the customer side and payments, right? We also have the providers. So on the other side, these similar types of issues and challenges arise and exist as well. People are looking for something that is, providers are looking to, within our system, they earn rewards. They're looking for rewards that are valuable, easily convertible to other forms of value. And and I think the same pitches start to build there as well. Render is plugged into this, this infrastructure that's built, provides various opportunities for the providers where we've had a lot who have asked us in the past. They're really interested in holding tokens. They want to kind of participate in the economies and things that exist there. It's not something that we can offer today. So this gives us that door into that. But it also doesn't hold anybody back. Taking render tokens and being able to exchange those through like a DeFi exchange. As we're digging into this more, there's lots of options as far as where you can go. So I think it's really exciting because for our existing gamer persona, we've obviously found a lot of success in scaling where we've gotten to now. But that doesn't mean that there aren't complaints. There's still a lot of people who say it would be a whole lot better if there were more options and more things we could do. And this really does kind of, again, work around some of that. One of, I guess, just a more concrete example would be something like a PayPal reward. We have a number of providers, hardware providers, who just look to something like that, where they can take the rewards they've accrued and transfer those out in US dollars or euros into their PayPal account, where then that gives them that liquidity, that mobility, the option to go take that now into other avenues. And I think that there we see the same thing. It's the speed and the time. It's not fast. There's fees, there's extra things added on. And really, I think in a way that made sense for a lot of these legacy institutions and the way financial rails were set up, it made a lot of sense. But there's newer options today that make sense for this year and this time. And we're going to, we'll also see that on the provider side. So it's not just those challenges and hurdles that I think customers face with those payment rails. It's also on the other side, receiving that value and being able to take it to whatever it is somebody's looking for, be that, Discord Nitro subscriptions for a month or, tokens, some kind of, cash equivalent. There's a lot of options there, and Render just opens the door even wider from where we have it today.
Yeah. And just to be clear, when you say providers, you mean the chefs, right?
The chefs. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The hardware providers and our chefs.
Yeah.
Sylvia, I'll just build on that if I can. Yes. For a second. So you mentioned in your question there, you were chatting to a couple of friends, and this friction is not something we really experience in the developed world all that often. Credit cards and these payment options work despite the friction that Kyle described. If you take that same pain point that people without, who aren't in the developed world, who aren't in the West, without that experience, and apply it to agents, this is kind of a forward-looking, hypothesis. By no means, is this our original thinking here? We've seen a lot of chatter on X about this, but a wave that we see forming is, and a question that's been posed is, how do agents go and pay for different services? And in our case, GPU cycles. They can't go and KYC with a bank and get a credit card themselves, and all of that friction that Kyle just described is not compatible with an agentic world where you have millions, tens of millions, billions of these agents interacting online. You really need a different payment rail, Render, Solana, or something like that, to facilitate a lot of these smaller, rapid transactions. And that is something that we see coming. We've seen a lot of talk about that. That is kind of a forward-looking reason from our perspective to really lean into this, to make sure that when that wave breaks, that we are ready to accommodate all of these agentic transactions in the future.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that, because that is real. That is underlying sort of everything, and not always seen, but especially in a multi-jurisdiction world, that becomes way more apparent than we might be used to. So Kyle touched on this a bit. Bob, while we have you on the line here, is there anything sort of, I mean, actually Kyle touched on it, but I'm going to just kind of wrap up this chefs and node operators topic by asking what specifically will change for node operators. I know we've all read the RNP and we know what does, and Kyle touched on it, but can you kind of walk us through specifically what changes for them?
Yeah, so there's 3 milestones as part of this RMP. Milestone 1 and 2, that's render payouts for chefs, that is render payments for customers. Those, relatively speaking, are trivial. As I mentioned, payments is already shipped. Chef render rewards is built. It's just in testing, so we're measuring that in weeks until that goes live. I think where it gets really exciting for the render community is when we get to milestone number 3 there. We are working on a blog post that will describe the how behind the RMP, which describes the what. The RMP is what we will integrate. We want to publish our integration plans, the how we go and accomplish that in the coming weeks. While the cost of making any changes is low, that is before we go and pick up the tools and start building this very big integration, we can get feedback from the render community and also from our chefs. So when RMP was approved a couple of months ago, we did hear from our chefs. Those are our compute suppliers. They did have concerns. A lot of these, I kind of touched on the persona before. These are gamers. They are not even crypto adjacent. They're in a different world altogether. And they're used to an experience where they have very stable earnings or rewards rather from their compute resources. And, we have to really think about how do we preserve that experience for them whilst delivering on what's required in that RMP. So there's been some feedback from chefs. We've got some really compelling ideas around how we scratch that itch for our chefs whilst also delivering on what's required in the RMP and all of the benefits that Kyle described for chefs. Many of them really are just so far from the crypto space, they're not even aware of the benefits that can come here. So that's a challenge in itself. But there's certainly been a lot of feedback from our suppliers, from our PC gamers, our chefs, and we've ingested all of that and we're putting together those integration plans that we will share publicly. We'll send that to the Render Foundation first for them to look at, and then we'll share that and publish that publicly to really engage everyone here as well as our chefs around what it is we plan to build for milestone 3 there.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll appreciate the heads up and the communication. I know that our community does when we do that. So, okay, let me zoom out a little bit, bring you guys back into the conversation a little bit later. But Tristan, I wanted to engage with you on the opportunity at a macro level, where we're at sort of in general. You and I have talked about this. I think we were talking about it yesterday. What the opportunity here can look like if we're able to remove some of these friction points from the payments and or transaction side for other industries. What can this unlock? And why is compute or what can that look like for the compute segment that we're in?
Yeah, super interesting. And it's definitely a front of mind question. Where is the right product market fit here? Because really the opportunity is very broad. It starts off with any compute load that could be run in a containerized environment. And as these usages or use cases evolve, which is happening fairly quickly, not only in the development of new AI models, but also in how the models are trained, the use case is shifting. So for example, if we went back 12 months, the idea of using a distributed network for AI model training really didn't make any sense. There were some pioneer papers that came out demonstrating how one could do it. But roll forward 12 months, and we've actually built a pilot for training a Gaussian splat model. And, that's kind of in the pilot stage, but it demonstrates that training can work in a distributed environment. And so, that's sort of one angle. Then the other sort of big picture filter is, all right, well, if you need the data center speed from machine to machine, what are the jobs that don't require that extreme high speed and can operate a few milliseconds longer latency? And on the AI inference, that comes in to play, and so that becomes a use case. And then another filter is, well, not everybody wants their data fed into one of the larger AI businesses for privacy reasons, for example, and may want to run their own model. So a decentralized environment allows you to take to access compute and set up your own model and then run your inference on that model inside an environment that you control with your own encryption. So those are kind of what I would call some of the high level filters. And then from there, it's really, it expands into almost potentially a Cambrian explosion of opportunities. You could set up, for example, an app store that draws compute from decentralized networks and allow people to go in and access bespoke models that make the usage more accessible. We've rolled out a number of recipes, for example, that users can go in, and that sets up a lot of the back-end details that allow jobs to run faster. And then, it expands into other areas that you might solve for as this usage expands, and you can start to see the usage patterns more clearly. So you might want to solve for data storage and accessibility at the same time, for example. But yeah, I'd love to hear some other thoughts on this.
Yeah, actually, you saying that right now, Tristan, reminds me exactly a year ago. I remember we were at Permissionless in New York City, and Trevor was talking about a brand new study that had just come out about how it actually is possible to train models on decentralized networks. And 12 months ago, that feels like such a long time ago, but back then that was kind of a new novel thing where data had just come out saying that actually you can get performant models trained on decentralized networks. So fast forward 12 months, Trevor, do you think that the capabilities possible on decentralized networks, and then coupled with on-chain payments as that layer that reduces some of these friction points, do you think that is gaining traction? What do you think we as an industry need to do more of to land that narrative a little bit better?
Well, I think there's definitely compute traction as a whole first. The growth that you've seen on the state-of-the-art providers is absolutely staggering. Anthropic's growth, OpenAI's growth. But when you dig a little bit deeper beyond that, one of the really interesting stats that I was surprised by, January, 60% of Open Router's traffic had moved from sort of more traditional US providers to open weight, lower cost Chinese models. And when you look at the makeup of those models, in many ways they've taken those papers we were talking about a year ago and have really built on them and have done some amazing things in terms of making them possible to run on consumer hardware. And so, you can see that in OpenRouter, and you can see that in the volume shifting, and particularly on the agentic side, people realizing you don't need to use the state of the art, Fable model for every calculation. In fact, for the vast majority of them, a cheaper and potentially one that can run on a decentralized node model would actually be a better choice. And where I see the industry as a whole now is really needing to open up and educate around those aspects. And you're seeing it emerge as we see agents come to the fore, and how agents integrate and are integrated. And the great thing from the crypto perspective is a lot of that focus has been on crypto agentic intersection, and I think that area is really, really exciting and quite important as we look out onto how we get the message out there on the decentralized compute side.
Bob and Kyle, were you guys crypto natives before we started talking?
I wouldn't call myself a crypto native, no, but I certainly followed the space. But a lot of this is very new to me.
What did it take to convince you guys, or did it take a lot of convincing to think about this?
I think it was really that moment a year ago where we kind of did an audit on where are the points of friction for our customers, and our payment rails, our legacy payment rails really stuck out. And that's when we started exploring other options and really started to think about, how can we solve this? How can we remove this friction? And started to dive more deeply into the space. And I won't speak for Kyle, but I know he since then has and certainly since this Render partnership started, has really started digging deeper, and has come to understand the benefits that can be unlocked here. But I don't want to speak for you, Kyle. I wouldn't call you a crypto native yet, but I know you've been digging very deeply.
Yes, it's a apt way, I think, to describe where I'm at there on that curve is not a crypto native yet. And as of, when I joined Salad, a little bit of history, you can, you can see and learn about us, right? We started really in that heyday of proof of work mining. And that, came with, when Bob founded the company, it was the start of seeing that there was this explosive demand for computational power, that it was going to outstrip supply. It's been a long bet, and but it keeps, it keeps showing, and it keeps coming up, right? And so this idea for us, building and tapping into idle computes all over the world, proof of work mining was an amazing way to get things started. So for a long time, I've been, kind of around the scene of Web3 and networks, but really from kind of the other end of, mining and infrastructure and running things and looking at, specifics of protocols and how things work. And I didn't really get too deep into tokens and holdings, and some of that is I can be a pretty conservative guy sometimes, and it was new, it was scary. I like to learn and kind of accumulate things. But yeah, starting a while ago, I mean, I've definitely started moving into it. I've been doing a lot more with it myself personally, but again, also something we've been public about and shared. We started working with the Golem Network team, kind of testing some of these ideas and thinking about where do things go. And really, for me, that was the very eye-opening experience of diving deep and really seeing these things that I had learned and knowledge accumulated over the past several years, but now really thinking forward to all those challenges I was talking about before. It's easy to see Like when you just take that moment, right, to step back, look at the product and say, this works today, it's easy, and it's something that instantly starts delivering value. So things didn't pan out, as we, wanted to think about where we would go with Salad on this. The way Golem Network was approaching things, that wasn't really the direction. But chatting with the Render Foundation and going through this, it just makes so much sense. And I think this is the right place for a subnet like this to be able to build out and demonstrate that it works. So I am moving on my way towards crypto native and joining, everyone else. Was not really just that short time ago.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Kyle. Actually want to see if we've got any questions. Sunny, can you help me sort through and see if we've got audience questions?
Absolutely, Sylvia. So we do have one question from Jay. Jay is a long-time supporter of the Render Network. He's been following the project very closely for the past couple of years. And his question, I believe this should go to Trevor. Where do you see overlaps and where do you see competition between Salad and Dispersed? I understand that they are two different providers, but if both use the same rails, i.e. Render, which provider should an operator join, and will the reward levels ultimately be the deciding factor?
Great, thanks, Sunny. Jay, lots in that. I think, yes, they are two services in Dispersed and Salad offering similar compute offerings. But when I think about first their acquisition strategies, most of it is really sort of inbound. They're not necessarily targeting a similar group of customers and sales team overlapping on those fronts. So I haven't seen a ton of the inbound overlap. But when we think about the node side, one of the areas that really excited me about having these subnets was the ability for spillover. And this is where the integration side needs to be thought out a little bit more. But you were hearing from Salad earlier that they've shifted to from a challenge of finding enough revenue to finding enough nodes. And in that circumstance, it would be great to be able to have Dispersed really be the overflow for those nodes if they can't source them themselves, and vice versa on Elastic type jobs. So I'd hope to see deeper and deeper integration between the various subnets as time goes by. In terms of incentives, it's challenging. Incentives are really more on the node side. On the customer offering side, there are different go-to-market strategies, and I think one of those is pricing. And these are two separate services, so I think they should both have their own approach, both go about whatever strategy there is, and really look more to what to do when you run out of available nodes and working together on those than necessarily needing to compete against each other. I don't know if Bob has more to say around that one.
Yeah, it's actually a conversation we've had recently with Tristan and others at Render. How do we think about this overflow capacity dynamic that could exist here? And ultimately, it's just a bandwidth consideration and kind of a triage consideration here. We're very focused on the RMP at the moment, but I can see us working towards a future there where that actually works to favor both Dispersed and Salad. So, and I'm see it as a slightly different offering in terms of the target persona on the supply side, but I definitely see those synergies there that you described, Trevor.
Amazing. Thank you, Trevor and Bob, for that answer. Jay, I hope that's kind of answered your question. Obviously, as both networks grow and as dispersed, develops further, there'll be more things to talk about in the future. I think to finish things up, because I know we're coming in on time, we are going to finish off with a lightning round. Now, we all love these, and the question is, what is it that you are excited for in terms of use cases, right? So first of all, we'll go with Bob.
Yeah, this was actually touched on earlier in the conversation. Distributed training of new models. It's definitely in the research kind of category right now, but it is starting to get a lot of traction. We have a customer in that space, and we're very excited about the demand that will bring beyond just inference.
Amazing. I remember distinctly people saying it was absolutely impossible. Now, not so impossible. Amazing. And let's see, Kyle. Yeah, same question to you, Kyle. So what are you excited about in terms of use cases? Okay, Kyle. I don't know if my X has gone down, or if you can't hear me, or if you are responding.
I can't hear him
I
either.
still.
So maybe let's go to the other
Okay.
panelists, and then we can come back to
Yeah,
Kyle.
let's move on to Trevor then. So, Trevor, what are you excited about in terms of use cases?
I'm really excited that we're moving Splat training onto decentralized nodes. If any of you were at RenderCon, a large part of RenderCon and what we see the current year is really the convergence of AI creation and traditional creation. And splats are such an important part of that. They're a format that allow you to move seamlessly back and forth between them. I mean, it's even the central piece on Apple's Apple Maps. So they're hugely important, and very excited that that training aspect is something we can do on decentralized GPUs, and then and marry that with rendering and other render work on the render network.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Trevor. So I've just heard that Kyle is having some technical difficulties. So same question to Tristan. What use case are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, but Bob and Trevor have the same views. So it's uncontroversial right now, but the decentralized training, just because it's the frontier kind of what can be done here, is a real draw. But to talk about some of the other things that are exciting, it's really cool to look at the case studies that were presented at RenderCon. We had some things there that I really didn't expect. For example, live risk tracking for satellite insurance. Didn't realize that was a thing, but yeah, fantastic. And and then there's some other really interesting use cases which deserve a little bit of airtime that we have talked about in the last 18 months, and that is breaking up workloads even for high industries that require high security. For example, the banking industry has a lot of financial information that it wouldn't want to necessarily run on a decentralized network, but it also has to digest and process and work with a large volume of publicly available information, particularly around rules and regulations in different jurisdictions. And those workloads can be done on a distributed network. And so there are very likely a number of other cases where you can take the either the highly the information that's to be in a SOC 2 environment, for example, and process that in a high cost network, and then take your other processing and process it in a distributed network where you could reduce some of those overheads. And the same logic applies down the chain of GPUs. You might use a higher end GPU for a more complex job or a bigger model. But if you're running a very specialized, very focused model, you could run it on a smaller or a lower grade GPU at a lower cost. So there are really some interesting ways to work with information in the space.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Tristan. And Kyle, I believe you have resolved the issues you were having. So let me ask you the question again then. So in terms of use cases, what are you most excited about?
Yes, one use case that I get very excited about on a personal level is actually drug discovery and molecular simulation, things in that category. You know, medicine, human health, and what we do. I work with computers all day long, but in the real world, it's people, right? And this idea of thinking about how we can accelerate, finding cures and solutions to diseases, to all sorts of things kind of across that spectrum. For a long time, I've been very adjacent to the biotech space, and I've really learned kind of how a lot of the business on that end operates, and it's really quite fascinating and intriguing. But when you look at how that ends up playing when things come to market around costs and insurance and that gets different all around the world with the way things go. But the idea that we are developing tools that are so unbelievable now, things we have access to, the speed at which things can be discovered, simulated, and taken into a lab where the timelines to actually test and demonstrate efficacy, it's being condensed. I think there's been a lot going on in that space and for some time, but I think like a lot of other things that have been going on, it's that the change of pace and the progression we're seeing there. And that's a space that just gets me really, really excited.
Amazing. I think if that was ever going to be a network in itself, it should be called the Mycelium Network. Right. I'm gonna hand over to Sylvia.
Thank you, Sunny. And I couldn't agree more with Kyle. In fact, one of the case studies we saw at RenderCon on his burst had to do with improving replicability of scientific studies using compute. So completely agree. In some ways, nothing is more important than our health. So I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Huge thanks to everyone from the Salad team, the Render Network team, and everybody who tuned in. This was the first stop on the road to integration, and we've got plenty more to share in the weeks and months ahead. If you're not already doing so, make sure to follow both Render Network and Salad on various channels, whether it's X, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., for future updates. We appreciate you being here, and we will see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone.